Ahoy!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AdCast, a podcast for the study of modern visual culture. Ahoy! Absolute Territory podcast first generation host and captain of the Absolute Territory Pirates, Renu desu.
Ahoy! Absolute Territory podcast first generation host and first mate of the Absolute Territory Pirates, Soup desu.
This week, AT stands for Ahoy Treasure! Because this week, we're going to be talking about piracy. But before we get into that, what have we been up to?
Well, that is a good question because, I'm sometimes I forget the last time that we like talked about anything. Ever since we switched to the monthly schedule, it's obviously been a little bit easier on us, but it kind of becomes a lot easier to forget what I've been up to.
Yeah, no, I feel that as well.
Yeah, I mean, not that we're up to that much overall, right? Like we're still kind of holed up indoors and all that.
Right.
Jazz.
It's kind of sad that despite the fact that we switched to a monthly schedule, I still don't have as much going on as I did when we were talking like bi-weekly.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. Sometimes sometimes our previous pace has just astonished me. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I have been up to like this and that here and there. I got new switches for my keyboard, and I swapped them out, and now I have a shiny new keyboard sound, which is exciting.
Oh.
It's much louder than it used to be, but it also is very nice to type on, very nice to listen to. I'm a big fan. I posted some pictures of it on Twitter, but
Yeah, you've
unfortunately.
always you kind of like have a passion for keyboards and customizing them, right? Like,
Well,
I feel
unfortunately, yes. Like this is the kind of thing about keyboards, which is that you buy like one mechanical keyboard, and then suddenly you fall down this rabbit hole where you're just like, okay, but like I need this and this and this, and like I need this case to be made of solid aluminum. I need there to be perfect stabilizers so that the long keys aren't rattling. I need a hot swap PCB so that I can move my switches in and out at will on a dime.
I don't know what you're saying.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I do enjoy keyboards. It's actually a terrible hobby. I don't recommend anybody ever do this to their life,
Really?
because keyboards are so expensive. Like when you like kind of get into it and you buy like a like a $70-$100 like gaming keyboard that has like mechanical switches, you're like, oh, good. I mean, yeah, like this is pretty expensive for like a keyboard. But for what is a more pleasant typing experience, it's one of those things where like your hands are so valuable that anything is really worth it. It's kind of like buying a chair or a bed, right? You want it to be kind of nice because you want that experience to not be terrible, since you're going to be doing so much of it, right? Because we spend so much of our lives typing.
Correct.
Unfortunately, when you go a little bit like beyond that, you slip into like rabbit hole territory where like people are like because this is the thing about keyboards, is that keyboards, despite being like quite a popular hobby, are still very like, they're not very like corporatized, I guess you could say. The only like real big kind of corporation behind like keyboard stuff at all is like Drop, which formerly known as Mass Drop. But they started their website as a group buy website, which is what most keyboard things are nowadays, right? It's very like small. This is kind of a funny way to say it, but it's a very farm to table operation where like
for keyboards.
Yeah, right. The organically grown keyboards, no GMOs. But yeah, they basically have like they run group buys, which are kind of like Kickstarters, except for you're gonna get something. It's not like this is how we fund it. It's just like this is a thing that is going to happen. we're just gauging who like wants to be a part of it, right? And the more people chip in and buy into the thing, the more things that come out, right?
Mhm.
The unfortunate part about this is that it means that keyboards are such a like ridiculously like time limited exclusive like terrible it's like buying concert tickets where you have to like hunch outside the website for like 4 hours and you're just waiting for the like moment that it like comes up so that you can be like so that you can buy it before the inevitable kind of stock just runs out and you have like 3 minutes to do it, and like it's all terrible. It's all terrible. And it means that like if you ever want to buy something that is like not on a group buy at the moment, you have to pay like out the wazoo for it because it's off season basically. People are like aftermarket buying. It's like the new Nvidia cards. People just like immediately snatched all of them up and have started to like kind of scalp them for a lot higher price.
Right.
It's funny because keyboard sometimes really feels like playing the stock market in an unfortunate way. That being said, there are very like decently affordable options. Like the keyboard I have is in terms of a quote unquote customizable keyboard, very, very cheap, right? Like my keyboard was probably like $180, which is expensive for a keyboard, or expensive for like a peripheral, kind of, unless you really want to get into like hobby stuff, but very, very cheap for something that has a hot swappable PCB, which means that you can just put switches in and out. Otherwise, you would have to solder it and desolder it every time. So this is a very handy thing to have. The only thing is, I have exactly one issue with this keyboard, which is that sometimes it will short out and stop working. But I've isolated the problem to I think it only happens when it gets above like 83 degrees in my room, because I think some of the parts are expanding and like making contact with parts that they shouldn't be. Because it's it's a metal like chassis, it's a metal case, and inside there's a lot of like wires and stuff. So like I bet it's getting too hot, something is expanding and touching something and it's shorting it, and that's why it takes forever to unshort itself.
That's so unfortunate because you live in the desert.
Yeah, well, we have air conditioning though, so it's not like the worst.
Sure, but
it's a little obnoxious, and it means I have to keep a second keyboard on hand just in case this one shorts. Which completely defeats the point of having a keyboard. Anyway, it's terrible because I've been falling deeper and deeper into this rabbit hole. So like now I want to use this keyboard as my like travel keyboard, as if anybody does any traveling whatsoever anymore. And then I want to get another keyboard that I can use as my home keyboard that maybe won't do the shorting thing, which is actually kind of the big thing that I'm really like more worried about, right?
Yeah, obviously.
But yeah, so now I'm looking at other keyboards, and I've fallen deeper and deeper into this hobby, and it's like I will probably get to right before I have to start soldering things.
Oh my god.
Which is not really much better, to be perfectly honest.
No.
But yeah, so don't get into keyboards, kids, because it is a deep dark hole, and you will end up spending hundreds of dollars on things you almost certainly do not need. Yeah, as far as like peripherals go, the most expensive hobby by far is audio equipment. Like you will go forever with audio equipment.
You could easily spend thousands of dollars on audio equipment.
But like keyboards are pretty rough sometimes. Like keyboards can, like I've seen keyboards that cost like $1,200 to $2,000, and it's like,
oh wow,
oh, I don't know about that one, Chief. Obviously some people also like commission other people to make them, and obviously that plays a part in it. Many of the parts are kind of limited, as I've said.
Right.
And all that kind of stuff. Like it's very, very like it's a very local community, right? In a weird sense, it's a very farm to table, as I mentioned. Because essentially like these things are just like, a bunch of people band together to get something made, and then they put it inside of a box they put on their desk to communicate. So anyway, aside from that, I have that's right, I went on that trip, which was actually very funny. This is really, really funny. So I went up on my trip to like a secluded mountain cabin, and we went up just as the air quality down here got really bad. Right? It was like orange, red sky, like end of the world, like Blade Runner filter bad. It was
Right.
like if you know anything about air quality index, it was like 230 plus, which is like really like you should not be outside for any amount of time whatsoever without like, you know, an N95 on. And even then you kind of want to minimize the time you spend outside. But we went up like just as that hit where we live, like really hardcore, and then we came down just as the air quality in the mountains became really bad.
Ah, that
So
timing though.
We literally somehow timed it perfectly so that like even though the air quality was not ideal up there, like some I think the worst day was like about 150, which is like you don't really want to be outside for too long. It will actively smell smoky outside. But yeah, we somehow managed to skirt the worst of it. We also managed to skirt the worst of the heat wave. It legit got to like 110 degrees down here where I live. Like on the day or two after I left, which is, whew, I'm really glad I skipped out.
Well, I'm glad for your health and your lungs that you were able to kind of like thread the needle there.
Right. It was kind of unfortunate because, like, you know, we went up to a lake and we wanted to do some swimming in the lake, but we got minimal swimming done. We did get some done, which was very nice, but because of the smoke, it was not advisable to be outside exercising for long periods of time, and also because of the smoke, it was much colder actually than it traditionally is, right? So, like, it drops the temperature by a couple degrees, and it's kind of noticeable when you're like, it's like 75 out or whatever, right? Instead of like 80. Because like, you know, 80 is like, it's a nice like temperature outside to like, you know, be warm enough that I would be compelled to go swimming in a cold lake. And like, it's a difference between that and, well, I mean, it's not really that hot out. Like, I could live without dunking my body into ice cold water.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right. Which was kind of unfortunate because we wanted to do some more swimming, but like, it just, you know, we just couldn't make it happen. But that's okay. We had a great time. We cooked a ton of food. God, we ate so much food.
Food.
We had Korean barbecue 2 different nights. At
oh
home,
my
obviously.
God, that's great.
We had hamburgers one night. We had steak one night. We had curry one night. Obviously, you can't have a camping trip or a pseudo camping trip without curry. Like, that's just illegal, right?
Yeah.
No, that was very fun. It was like a really nice like little 1 week getaway to like not have to deal with your parents and your family, and just be in kind of a close proximity to other human beings that aren't your family for a little bit. And on the bright side, we all came down and we're all fine. So no one has died yet. Obviously, you know, like, you should minimize the amount of contact you have with other people who are not living inside your house. But it was very, very nice to kind of take my mind off of everything.
Yeah, I mean, you guys did it. It sounds like as safely as you could.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Sometimes you just gotta leave the residence to get out of the cabin fever mindset.
Right. We have to get into a cabin to get out of the cabin fever.
Yeah, right.
It's very
exactly.
weird, very paradoxical. Yeah, it's funny. Like, because we couldn't go outside, we just stayed inside and played lots of like games. Like, I played a lot of Minecraft, and I started playing a different mobile game that just launched pretty recently called Lord of Heroes. Which is actually pretty good, shockingly. You can tell it is a small team that does not have a lot of budget, but it's actually honestly like one of the better mobile games I've played, having played most of the kind of like, you know, big ones at one point or another, right? I've played like Azure Lane, and I've played Girls Frontline. I still actively play Grand Blue Fantasy, obviously. I dabbled a little in Sinoalis and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's pretty good actually. Honestly, I was surprised at how good it was. Like, we only started playing because my one of my friends was like really hyped about the game because it's made by a Korean studio, and So they were like, oh yeah, I've been waiting for like the global release of this. It seems really cool. We could all play together. And it's like, okay, that sounds like fun. It's like a turn-based strategy, and it's kind of like Fire Emblem, but like mixed with like Final Fantasy. But it has like a lot of other stuff in it that makes it feel like all the character. Okay, I swear, Renu, if you look through the character designs for this game, you will not be able to link any of them to like the same game, right? Like even though the art style is the same, they all look like they come from different games, right? Like some of them look like they come from like Grand Blue Fantasy. Some of them look like they came from like Final Fantasy 14. But then you have some guys that look like they stream straight from like Cyberpunk 2077 or like Arknights, and you're like, what is happening? Why does that person have a gun? But yeah, no. So the character design is interesting.
Okay.
And they have like their kind of stated design goal is to be like more inclusive and like less stereotypical about their character design, which is really neat and cool. They have a lot of like, you know, cool female characters. They have varying skin tones. It's all pretty cool, especially coming from like an East Asian like developer. And the story is actually pretty good. I won't say what happens in the last like chapter of normal mode because it's fucking wild. Okay. But you know, just in case, I'll give it a month in case anybody actually wants to try picking up and playing it. Obviously I won't spoil a game that's been out for like, you know, 3 weeks or whatever. But yeah, I'm actually a big fan of it, and the unfortunate thing about it is like the global release obviously did not have a ton of resources behind it. They only have normal mode translated, and normal, hard, and extreme mode all have different stories attached to them, sort of. But the hard and extreme modes, actually, it's funny because the hard mode is not translated into English, but the extreme mode isn't out in Korean either. You can just play through those levels though.
Oh.
Yeah. So, there's some kind of shenanigans going on in regards to why that is possibly the case, or like why it is possible that can be the case. But it has to do with kind of the premise of the game that you get some quite shocking revelations about in the last chapter too. But like as far as an RPG or as far as a mobile game story goes, it is really strong actually for a game that actually like that has very few chapters out, I should say. I was very impressed overall. Like some games take a little bit of time to get into. Like as much as I love Grand Blue Fantasy, my god, the first like 50 chapters of the story are such a slog. It is rough. And I mean it plays off of that very well later, but like it's like One Piece where like, you know, you're like 400 chapters in and like something from chapter like 3 gets brought up and you're like, oh, that's really cool. But you're like, did I really have to go through 300 chapters to get there? Right. So, but yeah, Lord of Heroes, actually surprisingly cool. It's it's cool. Animated. The like art style of the game itself, like what it looks like in game, looks a lot like Ruby, but like more polished.
Okay.
Like if season 1 of Ruby had like an actual like team behind it and it wasn't, you know, a complete mess. As much as I obviously like love Ruby and wish it was good.
So it's like 3D with cell shading kind of deal?
Yeah, it's like cell shade 3D. But the models actually look surprisingly good. Like they're very simple, but they're very charming, and they have like really nice like little character details. But it looks a lot like Ruby. Like the art style is very Ruby-esque, which actually is like kind of a draw for me. I kind of like that. But yeah, so that is about all I've been up to. What have you been up to, Renu?
Let's see. I guess the biggest thing that's happened over the past month is while we were you might have like seen this on Twitter, but while we were clearing out our back garden, we incidentally cut a couple branches that were hanging over our fence from our neighbor's yard, and it turns out that they were poison ivy.
Oh no, what? I didn't hear about this at all.
Okay, well now I guess I'll tell you now.
Holy.
And so the thing is that my roommate was the one who cut down the branches, because I was kind of like clearing out the ground beneath because we wanted to plant some hydrangeas there. And so he cut them down, and then we set them aside, and then the next day his entire body was covered in red rashes.
Oh,
like
no.
like literally half of his face was swollen, and his eye was swollen shut, and then his neck was a bright red, and just like his whole body was it was so awful. And and because we didn't know at the time of like him cutting the branches and whatever, the oils spread inside our house. And so then I gradually started getting rashes.
Oh no.
And so he had it really bad for like a straight week, like unable to sleep, just itching constantly. We of course got like calamine lotion and stuff like that to try and mitigate it, but it was horrible. And basically the only way to really alleviate the itching would be to get shot, like steroid shots essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But health insurance being what it is, it would have cost maybe a lot to have that done.
Obviously, way too much
for him. Yeah. So he just kind of decided to bear with it, and I told him, like, if you have any kind of respiratory problems, we're going to the ER immediately. Like, I'm not gonna risk your throat closing up to save on some money. And so thankfully that didn't happen. His infection has by now mostly scabbed over and dried out, and so he's good. Mine was kind of weird. It just, rather than a full outbreak at once, it's just slowly been growing over time. So it's also been slowly dying off.
Wild.
But yeah, that was fun. Our hydrangeas look great. They're planted
well,
in the corner.
I'm glad you at least got that what you set out to do done.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my lord.
Yeah, that was fun.
That's a lot. Hold on. So was that, like, it surely wasn't grown on purpose, right? It was just overgrowing. Like,
no,
like
yes.
your neighbor's not just like
God.
some weirdo that grows poison ivy.
Oh, no. And it's so bizarre. Okay, so apparently our neighbors, they don't take very good care of their backyard, and previously our landlord has had to call HOA on them for having like a junk pile in their yard, right?
Yikes.
And
okay,
so, we when he looked up, what poison ivy looks like and stuff like that, he looks over and he sees that this tree, because we were trimming it because we thought that they were little, offshoots of tree branches, but actually it was the poison ivy had grown alongside this tree and reaches a good, like, 2 stories tall. It's just poison ivy covering this tree, and then at the very tippy top, you can see the actual foliage of the tree, which is a very different, like, dark green color compared to the bright green of the ivy, and it's horrifying.
Yikes. Oh, terrible.
We have a tree of poison ivy right next to our fence on our neighbor's side, and so we eventually managed to get into contact with our neighbors because they're kind of like, they don't come out, like, at all. So it was a tricky thing just trying to, like, talk with them, but eventually my roommate did, and told them about the issue, and they were like, yeah, we're aware of it. Obviously, we don't want to deal with it ourselves, so we have a yard guy who comes like once a week to like take care of like our yard and stuff like that. And so apparently they put something on it now that we told them that we really want them to put something on it and get rid of it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it will begin to die off and we won't have to worry about it anymore. But it's, yeah, it's an issue.
Yowza. Yowza.
Yeah, but in opposite of California news, it's been raining a lot here.
Wow, I wonder what that's like.
Yeah. We're in hurricane season, and you're in fire season.
Right, we haven't seen water in age. Oh, that's right, you're in Texas. I forgot.
Yeah.
Oh, Lordy. Yeah, I know somebody else from Texas who was talking about, like, Yeah, there's like 2 mega hurricanes that are just gonna slam into Texas. Don't worry, I'm not far enough like on the coast to like worry about, but like wow,
Yeah.
sure
Yeah.
it sure does kind of feel like sure does you know, Renu, I don't know if you've been feeling this this particular year, but like do you ever feel like I also don't know like what kind of upbringing you had obviously. But when I was but a wee little child,
Yes.
I grew up and I went to Sunday school every
Yes.
Sunday, and
Yes.
you know you learn about all the normal things, and also we would learn about how Moses was like, hey Pharaoh, you want to let my people go? And he was like, nah, bruv. And then God was like, "What if I just do terrible things to your land until you like concede?" And it really like, at what point do you think that the Egyptians were like, "Hey, are we being punished for something?" And not just like this, not just like you know what they say, the minus 1000 BCE. Am I right? Right? Like at what point did they stop just kind of blaming the occurrence of the year and more just like the terrible mismanagement of your country from the top down? Just a thought. No related reasons, right?
Yeah, no, it's but it's all fake news. It's fine, like whatever.
So yeah, you were drowning, and we are on fire actively. The year, it's 2020, am I right?
Yeah, it's because it's 2020. That's all.
Yeah, right.
Nothing. Don't worry.
Bad
It'll end as soon as the year crosses over. As soon as January 1st hits, we're fine. We're in the clear.
Personally, I'm my sort of foresight on this matter is 2021 will start, and like it's over. It's end of us days.
It's end
like,
game.
It's right. This is when like God sends the angels down with their feet made of fire and swords made of literal death, and this is when like I don't know, Godzilla rises from the ocean to tackle the meteor that's like pounding down upon us as we backslide into authoritarianism, right? Yeah, you know what? Godzilla can kill fascists. That's my belief.
Yeah. And then they'll make an anime out of it. It'll be pretty sweet.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, lordy. Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, speaking of anime.
Yeah, sure. I guess. Do you wanna talk about our topic?
Yeah.
I suppose so. Oh boy. So anyway, yeah. Now that everybody is sort of spending time indoors all the time, or at the very least, you should be, even though, like, oh my god, I like literally can't stop thinking about the fact that like, we are all obviously kind of staying indoors as much as possible so that we can mitigate the spread of a deadly pandemic. But like, it really just kind of feel like it's okay. Doom over. Let's talk about piracy.
Okay, all right, okay, good. you worked it out.
Yeah, no, I have to work through my internal feelings of dread and doom every day to just wake up in the morning. So
there you go. Yeah.
Let's talk about piracy, which is a thing that is quite relevant sort of always to really any kind of media consumption landscape.
Yes.
This was obviously, a big deal in like 2008 or whatever. It was obviously a big deal when this was a debate that kind of happened over manga translations, when those started to get kind of picked up by publishers, or companies started to get founded for that express purpose. And, it was a topic of quite some controversy recently. And I have to admit, I'm not super well versed on the debate itself. But the Internet Archive basically was just like, hey, here's a bunch of like stuff you can look at. And people were like, yo, that's pirated stuff, and like my stuff is in there, and if you read it there, like it's going to actively hurt me. And so obviously this is like something that is always a little bit contentious, and you're never really sure who believes what, because it is one of those things where like, you know, somebody who otherwise would normally agree with you on most things will suddenly come out and just be like, well, no, I don't think anyone should ever pirate anything. And I guess I should probably say outright, like my stance, generally speaking, is that I think that piracy is a necessary stopgap in our society and will continue to be for the foreseeable future for various reasons that we will obviously get into in the course of the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I tend to think that Renu would probably agree with me here.
Yeah.
Considering the notes that I'm looking at, it seems you're pretty pro piracy in that regard. We are not encouraging you to go pirate things.
Oh no.
Actively.
Yeah.
What you kind of do with your media consumption and the sort of legality surrounding that is your own choice, and we are not encouraging one way or another.
It's just a sense of like, if we don't necessarily want piracy to exist, but it kind of has to at this state in the game.
Yeah. So yeah, let's get into it, right? So
yeah.
Piracy. So what is piracy? I mean, if you didn't grow up on the internet, maybe you don't know, but you wouldn't pirate a car, would you? You wouldn't download a car or a pizza. Yeah, so piracy is basically anytime you use a paralegal channel to obtain something, right? So like if you go and you watch an episode of a television show on YouTube that somebody has ripped and put online, that is obviously not where the creators of that piece of media intended for it to end up, but watching it on YouTube is an act of piracy. So
right, you're illegally distributing it without the express permission of the creators of the media.
Right. And I guess like we'll just start by talking about like streaming services, because obviously, you know, back when we were watching anime on 3 parts on YouTube that were like fan subbed or whatever, it was actually physically impossible to get that stuff legally in the United States without just like profound amounts of technical expertise and knowledge, right? Like you would first have to know Japanese, and then you would have to be able to find a way to import like a videotape or like a DVD or even a Blu-ray, right? And then you would have to watch it and also understand it. So there are a lot of, and like the thing is like Blu-rays aren't like unlimited either. They have stock to them, and so they sometimes run out of stock, and people don't want to make they don't want to pay exorbitant shipping fees for like this little flimsy disc of stuff. So in recent years, streaming services have gotten fairly robust, as with most sort of things, but like you can buy things officially on YouTube. You can buy the Promare movie officially on YouTube, and it'll just be tied to your account for the rest of time, maybe, hopefully. So, but like, yeah, so like streaming services are all over the place now, right? Like we used to not have anything, but now we have like Netflix, we have Hulu, we have Funimation and Crunchyroll, obviously, in the sort of anime sphere, amongst many other sites. And the question is, do we need piracy now that all of these streaming sites exist? And, you know, my sort of response to that is pretty straightforward and obvious. Like, yeah, we still obviously need piracy, right? Like,
we might be a little biased, but
we might be a little biased, but like, I promise you, like, as people who run an anime podcast, who try their darned, I promise you, we try so hard to get things officially.
We do.
Whenever possible, like we even like, you know, ask you for Patreon money to like continue to stay subscribed to these things, because, you know, you might find our content valuable, you might find our insight into shows valuable, which obviously like that makes me happy, but like I don't think that a human being should have to pay $50 to $60+ a month just to keep up with like 4 anime shows. Do you know what I mean? Like, no human being should have to do that.
You are correct.
Like, that's just not reasonable, but it's the model that we have right now because, like, streaming
Right.
is rapidly becoming just cable again, where you have to buy cable packages,
Yes.
right?
And right, and the thing is that even though cable, granted, would run you about that much, right, $50 to $60 per month, depending on your plan, even the most basic plan would have, you know, a handful of channels with multiple shows on them that you could just watch. Versus, you know, if you have a handful of shows, like a handful of anime shows, you have to go and find what streaming service offers it, subscribe to that service, and then maintain your subscription to that service, among others. And it's crazy how inconvenient it is.
It's absolutely terrible, right? Because, like, the thing about streaming services is that we have reached, and this is like the thing, right? About this is the point of the podcast where I obviously have to point at capitalism and say, like, this is
capitalism.
This is obviously ridiculous and bad, right? But, like, legitimately speaking, like, we are at a point where, like, shows are getting so exclusive to certain, like, platforms, and so, like, God, this is terrible. Where, like, licensing is so terrible. I hate licensing so much. It's one of maybe the worst things we've ever invented. And obviously we did it for a good reason, right? Because it is, and, like, we should make this very clear, is, like, we are very pro arts. So, like, we are very for the idea that people are getting compensated for their work, right? And part of that, and part of the problem people have with piracy is that it circumvents that, you know? Even if people are experiencing the thing that somebody made, because they're not doing it through the official channels, they're not going to, like, boost the numbers. They might boost online discussion for sure, right? Like, that's kind of, like, unquestionably, like, that is a benefit. It's not a measurable one, though, and we'll never be able to measure it, really, unless we just ask everybody who ever has an opinion about an anime, hey, did you pirate this, right? And so, like, you can obviously boost online discussion, but if you're not, like, buying something, if you're not buying something that is paying into it, and if you're not, you know, buying something, or if you're not just getting eyes on the official sort of channels, then people are going to not be as inclined to trust it or back it, right? So, like, financially speaking, you know, what usually would get you, like, another season might not, because of all of the sort of illicit views, even though people are talking a lot about your show. And that's not the problem with that, is that it's always been one of those nebulous, unmeasurable things, right? We'll never know one way or another if piracy hurts or helps a series or a piece of media. And we might have opinions about whether it does or not, but, like, tangibly, it is very difficult to trace that, like, materially speaking. All that being said, like, my goodness, streaming services are so terrible, right? Because, like, all of them have, like, one license to, like, one show or, like, two shows. And they try to snipe the most anticipated shows too.
Yes.
Which is why you will always get, like, Netflix takes probably, like, the biggest one and just, like, snipes it. And they're like, you're not going to see this for, like, 3 or 4 months. So just kind of deal, right?
Yep.
And Crunchyroll will usually, like, pick up, like, you know, 2-ish big ones and then, like, a couple of, like, B tier ones, right? And like, they'll try to do that. Funimation has started to pick up a lot of steam with the shows that they license. Specifically, the thing I'm thinking of recently is Toilet Bound Hanaka-kun was technically Funimation, although and we'll talk about Hulu after, but, like, and Decadence, right? What's interesting is that Hulu appears to be I don't actually know why this is the case, but a lot of Funimation shows end up on Hulu. I don't know if they are owned by, like, a parent company, or if Hulu is just really good at getting, like, secondary licenses that let them stream shows that are otherwise licensed by, like, a you know, a company like Funimation, right? And obviously, like, Funimation does have some amount of claim to this because they do dub. Like, they're a dubbing company, kind of, first and foremost.
Right.
But at the same time, like, one of the best periods to watch anime streaming wise was when Funimation and Crunchyroll basically let you watch the same catalog together, whether on Crunchyroll or on Verve or whatever, right? Because suddenly you had access to the majority of the mostly anticipated shows for the price of one streaming service, which is fantastic, right? And this is the kind of thing where it's like, okay, maybe capitalism is like doing something like as intended, right? Maybe it is spurring innovation and competition, and then you see what that eventually leads to, which is that like everybody just starts their own streaming platform, right? Like if you're Disney, why would you ever license your media out if you have so much money, if you have more money than God, and you can just make your own streaming service and charge people $40 to see Mulan, the terrible live action remake?
Here we go.
I didn't watch it. I watched other people watch it though. I
have watched reviews of it because I wanted to see what they would think.
Zesty. Yeah.
Yeah, it's spicy.
So yeah, like you're just going to get to a point where big companies with a lot of money are just going to snipe the things that they want, right? And that is a problem for multiple reasons, because first of all, it means that people are not going to be able to watch everything that they want to on one platform, right? Which is just not, it's just not convenient, right? And like, you know, you get it. It's a business model, right? That's how they try to get customers. But it means that as somebody who watches a lot of anime, you're kind of shafted. You're on the terrible end of the stick. You're not getting a better product in any respect. You're just having people divvy things up. Like, it's kind of like gerrymandering, where like instead of like really having a choice about anything, people are just kind of divvying you up, and or like, you know, it's like internet companies, right? Like ISPs, like internet service providers, where they're like, well, if I just like never enter this area, you just never enter this area, and like we just shake on it, and all of a sudden they have a de facto monopoly, right? This is like the opposite, right? This is where everybody has like a little bit of something that you want, and so you have to like split your money this many ways to get it, which is just awful, because it's like, it doesn't feel very good to pay like $5 a month just to watch like one show. It never feels good, obviously, to do that, but like, especially if you want to keep up with kind of a lot of stuff. And like, that's something that we're always a little bit conscious of when we're talking about anime, which is like, this is like, you know, part of the reason we complain about, you know, Netflix jail, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it is hard to watch anime. It is harder to watch anime now than it like has any right to be if you want to go through the official channels, because they exist, but they're obnoxious. And
yes,
the second big problem is that it means that smaller shows don't get picked up, right? Because nobody wants them, right? And so it means that like weirder stuff, more experimental stuff, stuff that is maybe not necessarily like done by Japanese studios, doesn't really get picked up. And so even if you want to watch those things, you still have to go out and pirate them. It's not possible to watch them in any legal capacity unless you go out and you buy a Blu-ray afterwards. And I cannot stress this enough. We cannot have buying Blu-rays be the solution to anime. We cannot have that be the case. We have streaming technology for a reason.
Right.
Like,
that is not the way that technology is advancing.
It is fine to buy a Blu-ray of something for one reason or another, right? To support it, to show your support, to like, you know, show some support for the studios or the animators. And, you know, it's very well another thing just to have to buy it for like, you know, $20, $30, $40 plus shipping just to watch it, right? And it might not even be good, right?
Right.
Like,
right, exactly.
and sure, there is a little bit of, you know, is that kind of entitlement to media? Are we entitled to media? And the answer is like, well, no, but is what I would say, right? We are not entitled to like see media ever, right? It's not like a right that we have that we get to watch something, right? Because it's entertainment, right? But at the same time, I would say that doesn't mean I can't complain about the fact that it costs like $40 for a Blu-ray, right? Like, there are very few people who can afford to watch anime like that, and I don't think anybody does, really, right? Like, the thing about Blu-rays is, sure, that is fine. It's an official channel. It supports the developers, I'm thinking about video games. It supports the studios directly, because it's a sale. But at the same time, people in Japan just get to watch it on TV, and like we don't. Like we get it through streaming sites because that's how we get stuff broadcast to us.
Yes.
And like I don't know, it's just a little shit that like we have the capability to spread art and we just choose not to because it would lose us money. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, no, we obviously don't have a right to see a specific piece of media, but like, also, like, why aren't we just doing this in a better way in the first place? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with advocating for something a bit better, a bit more convenient, a bit more, like, bang for your buck for the people who, nowadays, we spend more and more time consuming digital media.
Right.
So it makes sense that we would want to have that in as best a package as possible. And so when we have these companies that try and divvy it up for capital gains and whatnot, rather than actually competing with each other to create better services, that's a huge problem. Right. We're not getting the same product but better from these different companies. We're getting different products. Like, these different shows, you don't go and find, I don't know, like, it's not like there's an alternate version of My Hero Academia on other streaming services if it's offered exclusively on one, right? You want to watch that show specifically. And so it just doesn't make sense to divvy up the content that way.
Right.
In as a result, it holds us back from actually having competent streaming sites. We're always talking about how janky they are, like, especially Funimation.
If I had a dime for every time Funimation's, like, here's the thing. Here's a like short list of complaints of Funimation's website that I can just like nail off the top of my head.
There you go.
One, the forward and backwards buttons on like the episode list don't work. They just don't work. Like, I don't know if it is a problem with like an ad block I have or whatever. Like, we're subscribed to Funimation, so it's not like we're gonna get ads anyway. I don't know if it's a problem with the ad block or like some of my script blockers, but like those buttons like legitimately don't work. Like the volume button is very difficult to manage because it like only shows up if you click it, not if you hover over it, which means you have to mute the show and then
you have to mute it before you can adjust the volume.
It's not responsive at all. So like sometimes it will not like show you that like the show itself is muted. So you have to just click the button until you figure out if sound is coming out or not. There's no like real playlist functionality, which is terrible for, you know, something where you might want to like skip forward between episodes, etc. It's less of a problem than like say on YouTube, but like still kind of just irksome. There's not really an easy way to navigate the video pages either. So if you click the like, you know, the page for the thing, you would have to click. So because the forward and backwards buttons don't work, right? You would have to click the actual name of the series and then scroll down. And then you would have to hit another menu, like another scroll menu to hit season 2 if you're watching season 2. And then you would have to find the episode. That's terrible.
It was literally when we were watching Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya that I had grossly underestimated how many episodes we had to watch because it was hidden in a scroll menu. The other half of the episodes were hidden. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, Renu got hit with 5 extra episodes that she was not expecting. It's terrible. It's terrible.
But also, I would have completely missed them otherwise. You know, if Soupy hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known about them.
Yeah, yep. If we had not sat down to watch it together, you would not have known. Which, I mean, to be fair, it's Endless 8, so, like, that wouldn't have been the worst. You would have just been a little confused when I was, like... You would have just been a little confused when I was like,
was the rest of season 2 as well, but yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, these sites suck, actually. Like, consistently speaking, the site that like is still the best watching experience in my opinion is still Netflix. Like it still is just the one that works because they made it work to begin with and they haven't really messed with it since. I mean, okay, Netflix has some other problems where because of their binge format, they will sometimes auto-skip openings for you and auto-skip endings for you, which is annoying if you watch anime because, like, openings and endings are part of the experience of watching an anime, which is, sure, a kind of minor complaint, and you can, like, get around it, but, like, it makes it a little harder to just kind of auto-watch all of it. I wish there was some fine-tuning that you could do in that regard. But, like, still, you know, the Netflix video player takes up the whole window. It will resize automatically. Like, all of the buttons work.
It's actually a solid streaming site.
It works, right?
It works.
So that's why it's terrible that the thing about Netflix is that they just refuse to simulcast anime. It's like, you were almost the best of the anime viewers. Like, Crunchyroll is okay. The like tracking for where you are in an episode is a little janky sometimes. And they changed the way your queue works, which is like the list of like shows you have pinned basically. That I really don't agree with the way that they changed that because it basically makes it so that it only tracks it by the most recently interacted with instead of being able to be, I don't know, a list that you could customize yourself. I don't know why, but that just seems more intuitive to me. So, like, why would you change it for the worse?
Wait, what?
Yeah,
I had no idea
it's
they did
terrible. This stuff sucks, right?
Oh
like,
my
god! one of the better ones I would say nowadays is High Dive. I think High Dive has one of the better video players. The only problem with High Dive is that because they're a smaller company, they just don't get licenses to good shows anymore.
Oh sure, yeah.
They had like one or two, like, okay, I'll give them credit, like 3 or 4 seasons of like pretty solid stuff, right? Stuff that, you know, people were not necessarily as enthused about picking up, or like secondary licenses. So they had, you know, stuff like Shoujo Kakeki Review Starlight, which was a very sort of heavily underrated show. They had Oh Maidens in Your Savage Season, which obviously we never ended up finishing, but was fascinating, and I want to come back to it someday. But like stuff like that, where like I was actually legitimately kind of excited to watch it, and but now they don't really have anything that interesting, which is a crying shame. But like, can you really blame them? Like, Crunchyroll has enough money to like bankroll its own anime now, which is
literally.
Don't get me wrong, that's actually really cool, and I'm like,
it is
very
cool.
Glad for that. Obviously, there's the problem of Crunchyroll not paying its translators a living wage, but you know, we all make mistakes under the terrible oppressive system that is capitalism. But like, the thing is that like these sites don't really have an excuse for being as bad as they are, right?
Exactly.
If capitalism really makes better products and, you know, is innovation through competition, I'm sorry to say, bud, but it don't really seem to be working.
Right. There is something horribly wrong with what's going on with these streaming sites and the way that their competition is working.
It kind of reveals something, which is that when people talk about like innovation through competition, they assume that everything is an equal playing field, when in reality, it never is or has historically been that way, right? The thing about, you know, businesses is that some businesses are bigger than others. When you get to be a big business, you can spend more money than other businesses. If you can spend more money, you just become better by force of having more money. So even if your streaming site is absolutely garbage, if you own the licenses to every show that people want to watch, they're going to sign up for your service. And there's no way around that by just making a better product, right? This is the thing about this is, for instance, the thing about like the Epic Games Store or Steam in comparison to a site like GOG. Like GOG is like pretty well regarded as one of the like better game buying platforms, but nobody ever buys from it because Steam has like everything and people don't want to leave Steam. And then Epic Games gets around this by having so much money that they can just buy games, and they're like, no Steam for you for 1 year, right?
Right, like, exclusivity,
yeah, like that's the only real way to make any sort of competition happen, right? Like if you're not if you're not sniping the biggest shows of this season, you're not getting anywhere, no matter how good your video player is.
Right, and likewise, people complain about how janky the Epic Store is, and
Right, it
how
sucks.
they
It's
didn't
so
even have
garbage.
they didn't even have a shopping cart for the longest time.
Oh,
I
it's
don't
so
even know if
bad.
they do now.
Oh, they don't. They do not.
Okay, great. Well, there you go. And so, again, it's not promoting any kind of innovation in the product. It's just like if these companies were buying little mini monopolies, right?
Yeah,
By
absolutely.
buying this product is singular in its uniqueness. You can only get this one product. There's nothing like it. And so they take that, and you don't have the product anymore. You might have something that's kind of, maybe a little kind of parallel-ish, but it's not going to be the same. And so what's the point?
Right.
It's not, at the end of the day, it is going to be who has the money and the resources to buy the biggest, best thing, and then everyone else is fighting for the scraps. And,
Right.
The audience is left to pay everyone.
Like, this is the thing where, like, sure, you can carve yourself out a little like, a little niche, and you can focus on like certain kinds of content that get ignored by mainstream publishers. Like, for instance, if you were like a streaming site and you were like, okay, we're gonna like really focus on getting like LGBTQ forward anime, right? Like, that's a much smaller pool to draw from, and one that is like arguably more compelling to a very like certain subset of anime fans. And sure, you can build something that way, but you are never, ever going to build anything that can compete with like a company like Netflix, unless you are also a big company like Netflix, right?
Unless you are already a huge company.
Unless you are like Tencent, who owns like 10% of like the internet at this point, right?
Yes.
It is
Yeah.
categorically impossible to make a quote unquote better product, because that's just not how it works, realistically speaking, right? So like, yeah, I mean, at that point, piracy becomes quite the compelling option. Like, piracy was probably way down like a couple years ago when streaming services were largely had the same catalogs, right?
Yes, that's true. They overlapped in catalogs, and they were also, even though they were still pretty new, they let you do stuff like buffer the video or download the actual source media, and so then you didn't have to stream live and have it be super inconvenient and
Right. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, to be fair, like, God knows, Crunchyroll stayed on Flash Player for way too long.
Oh, the Flash!
Like, I don't know if you remember this, but like,
I remember.
do you remember when the entire internet and their grandma moved to HTML5, and then Crunchyroll was still over here like, oh, you have to download an update for like Flash, and it's like, what are you doing? Crunchyroll, it's not 2006 anymore. You can't just have a Flash player.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like I really can't blame anybody for pirating anime nowadays, considering what the landscape looks like, how bleak
I mean,
it is.
Yes, there's a minor inconvenience with pirating sites where you have a lot of just this deluge of inappropriate ads everywhere in order to support the hosting and whatnot. But that is such a minor inconvenience compared to the actual player and the streaming services, or the streaming site working, right? They have the whole catalog. They have a player that works. You can mute and unmute and change the volume without, without having to mute the entire video first. So it's convenient in multiple senses of that. The site works. There's the full catalog, and you'll get an entire. They have a way of like exposing you to anime that you might not even know remotely about, because they have it on their features page. They'll show all sorts of different anime, like what's currently airing, what's the most popular of all time, different genres, etc., etc. And I haven't seen streaming sites that quite do it as well. They try, granted, but it just because they by nature have to offer only what they're limited to on their sites, you will never get exposed to like the plethora of anime that actually exists out there that you might actually really enjoy.
Yeah, frankly speaking, it's a little in like you're a little bit like, wait, what? It's a little incredulous to me, honestly, that it is so much easier to watch anime on a pirate website sometimes. Like,
Yes.
sometimes it takes so like little effort compared to what you have to wrangle like Funimation for instance, right? And like geez, come on, guys, like the pirates built a better website, right? Like, this is one of those things where like if you offer, and this is one of the kind of traditionally understood arguments, which is that if your service, which you're asking people to pay for, is a better service than piracy, then people will pay for it.
Correct.
Obviously, there's the little caveat that like it's sort of more complicated now because one, website's not very good. Two, the licenses are kind of split all over the place, etc., etc., etc. But like that adage kind of holds true, right? Like it's people don't want inconvenience. Like people don't want to have to wrangle with something. They don't want to have to go to like 800 different websites to watch something. If they can just watch something, like everything they want to watch on one website, like they will, right?
Yes.
And like that's the thing. Like that, maybe if that were the case, then like you could perhaps build an argument to say that you would pay for the better service. But like, I mean, at the end of the day, like we're being held hostage, right? Like I feel like piracy is an appropriate sort of response to literally our media being held hostage. Yeah, and like I should be clear here, right? Like this is the thing about anime is in my opinion fairly unambiguous, right? It is not like for instance it is not like books, right? Because that was kind of the controversy about the Internet Archive thing, which is that like books obviously are made by one person or a small team of people depending on what kind of book it is, and when you are one person who makes books, right, it can feel like a personal attack on you if somebody decides to pirate your book, because you're basically like, you can personally see one-on-one like a sale that is getting away from you. Obviously it's a little bit of a fallacy because like they might not have bought the book in the first place, and like really when you think about it, right, this is less a problem with like this is less a problem with like showing support for things and more about like we should probably address the sort of system that makes these things, like that makes an adversarial relationship between consumers of media / pirates and people who make media, right?
Right.
Like
yeah,
that's the big thing, which is that like if you are upset about people like stealing your sales, etc., 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 obviously like that can feel pretty bad. And like, sure, nobody's entitled to any specific piece of media, right? Like, it is not my God-given right to read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, for instance. But like, but on the other hand, it's like, well, who's really putting you in that position in the first place, where you have to contend with pirates, right? Is it the pirate who's like some poor like schlup like me who just like has like $5 in their bank account, or is it maybe the like multi-million or billion-dollar company that is in charge of managing your thing and distributing your thing, that is making it so difficult for people to obtain your thing that they just like have to pirate it, right? Like that's kind of the thing, right, about the anime industry overall, which is
right,
when you think about it, anime is such a big industry. Where does all that money go? Because it obviously isn't going to the animators. We've known that for decades, right?
Yes.
And like animation is one of those, and this happens with any creative medium. Like it happens with animation, it happens with writing and publishing, it happens with obviously the video game industry is a big one under fire right now. But like, people's passions for things get exploited. People look at a golden age of anime that may or may not have existed and say, like, this is when Hideaki Anno made Neon Genesis Evangelion. Don't you want to be like Hideaki Anno? And it's like, okay, I would also like to be paid money so that I can exist as a person, rent a place to sleep at night, and eat food. I don't feel like I'm asking for too much there, right? Like,
Right.
At the end of the day, people's passions are being exploited, and one has to wonder where all the money is going. Like, is the problem with us in the West pirating media and not showing support? Or maybe the problem is that, like, all of these corporations kind of pay their animators beans. Like,
Right.
you can't just point at people like not paying for something and say, "Hey, how dare you not pay for that thing?" When, like, you look at a bunch of people who are paid quite a lot of money not paying their animators. And obviously, it is not necessarily that straightforward, but also maybe on some level it is, right? Like, anime makes so much money. It makes so much money. It is so big. Where is all that money going? Where is it going, right? One has to wonder.
You have to think about it.
So
if you want to support the anime industry and you're very passionate about buying merch and the Blu-rays and all that stuff, you have to think about where your money is going.
Right.
And whether it's actually reaching the intended place. And
then and like, kind of to do with, like, more about distribution, but, like, because these, pieces of media are distributed by companies, they will not distribute to places that they will not make money. So, for instance, if you happen to live in certain countries, you won't be able to watch anything legally anyway, right? So
region lock.
Yeah, region lock is terrible because, one, there's no oceans on the internet, like, and I get it. Like, there are different laws surrounding things, and this seems like a very complicated space to navigate. But, like, for some people, it is legitimately not an option to watch any anime at all except for via piracy. So, like, I mean, I really can't be mad about people pirating when it's the only like, think about how long Neon Genesis Evangelion was not available to view legally in any form whatsoever in the United States. It was like 20 or 30 years, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
people had to bootleg VHSs and then get some weird fan subs online and just do it that way.
And, like, Evangelion is one of the biggest anime of all time, to the point where, like, pretty much everybody who was in Western anime spheres knew about it, despite the fact that it is not available. Like, you can directly kind of, and, like, this is kind of sort of a different case, but, like, very similar, is something like Cowboy Bebop, which was a commercial flop in Japan, but, like, gained a cult following in the United States after it was dubbed. And like, when you let media have a chance to shine in other markets, you might find hidden gems where there were none otherwise, right?
Right, exactly.
Like, people in Japan didn't really like Cowboy Bebop for quite a long time until, like, they realized it was actually, like, quite popular overseas. And, it would kind of be a shame if something like that were to fall through the cracks just because someone just decided, like, as a business decision, we're not gonna, like, distribute this, right?
Right,
is, like,
and that happens all the time.
Yeah.
That happens all the time with so many Japanese media, like so many games, so many shows, all of that. Like, there are really great products out there that just don't get distributed and shown.
Don't even get me started on how many Ace Attorney games are not translated into English. My God. I will be here talking forever. But yeah, like, and it's funny because, like, for I don't actually even know if like, like, when I think about it, like, something like Ace Attorney Investigations was like, the second game in that series was never translated into English. Daigyakuten Saiban was never translated in English. I think there was, like, one or two other ones, but, like, yeah, I think there was even a sequel to Daigyakuten Saiban. But, like, yeah, it's pretty bad when your one sort of link is piracy. And I mean, like, to be fair, like, when I experienced Danganronpa, I watched Let's Plays, and I watched somebody translate it, like, week to week, Like,
wow.
so that game didn't even exist in the Western sphere until
Right.
that Let's Play came out
Right.
and people learned about it. And
Yeah.
now all of the games are released in English on most major platforms, right?
Yeah.
There is an argument to be made that those games came here because of piracy, I guess you could call it. Right? And obviously, there are certain other conversations to be had. I mean, really, when you think about it, piracy is the grand tradition of anime. Like, people have been recording live broadcast anime forever.
Yeah.
As long as people have had the capability of recording at home, they have taped anime. It is a legitimate part of like otaku sort of history to talk about taping shows. Like, there's really like no, and like the thing is that that was the way that people got anime here for the longest time. Like,
Yep.
back in 2011 when Madoka Magica was still airing, you were getting commercials. You were getting Japanese commercials while you were watching that show. Like,
yeah.
like the morning rescue was real, right? And look at how far we've come in 9 years. We've come far enough for the industry to explode and grow massively, and then decide to atomize into little itty bitty smithereens.
Right.
For the rest
and you
of
have
time.
to think about, as desperately as the industry tries to kill off piracy, so much of their fan base is due to piracy, is the fact that they had fans who were exposed to this media due to free sites, free fan subs.
Right.
And then they decided that they were going to go and support the official licensed product by buying it. If they weren't exposed to it in the first place, they wouldn't have known about it in order to buy it.
Yeah. And like at the end of the day, right? Like, piracy is a problem because entertainment is an industry. Like, piracy is not a problem in a world where like media is a commodity to be secreted away and only distributed to those who buy in with money, right? Like, if we lived in a world that really like actually valued the arts and valued the arts as a kind of way of being human, and we kind of didn't have to focus on making money all the time, we would get much better pieces of anime. We would get much better novels because people aren't stressed out about eating all the time. So like,
right,
piracy is a problem, and it's mostly like, really, I would argue that it is kind of a pathologized problem. Like, or I guess I should. It's pathologized as a problem, right? It's not necessarily a problem in the abstract until you bring in the conditions of people who work under brutal working conditions and don't get paid their dues. Like, that's obviously a problem, and like, when possible, you should show support, because we obviously don't live in a world where we value the arts as an art, right? And we don't live in a world where people are compensated fairly for the work that they put in. But so you should do what you can to show your support for those people who are living in those conditions now. But at the same time, sometimes they don't let us, right? Like, I mean, really,
how do we reach them?
Really, like, what can we do as individuals? And the problem is that it's not a problem that can be solved by individuals. Piracy is a problem that is kind of it is a problem in the way that many of American ills are characterized as a problem, which is to say it is considered a moral failing and not like anything other than that, right? It's basically saying, tut, how dare you steal food from the mouths of animators? And like, meanwhile, Mr. like Fat Stacks is over here like counting like wads of cash and is like eating like 6
laying off animators
pounds of
left
walnuts at a time. So like, it is like, piracy is one of those things that is an easy problem for people to point at, because it says this is a problem because you individually are contributing to a problem, when in reality the problem is actually like larger and systemic and
Yes.
like endemic to the structures that we live under, right?
Right.
You can and should show your support whenever possible. It's not always possible, but like, you know, if you watch, like if you put one more view on like an episode of an anime on like Crunchyroll or whatever, like sure, it's something. But at the end of the day, you really wonder, like, what is the actual difference between me paying $5 a month to Crunchyroll and like not paying $5 a month to Crunchyroll? Because like it's pretty small. Like you as a person are not gonna have a huge impact, right? And you can make an argument saying like, well, you know, sure, but like that's when you build like a movement, it's about you know, what one person can do in conjunction with many other people. But I mean, I guess in regards to that, I would say, have you ever looked at any video game boycott ever? Because they don't work. When people vote with their wallets, it doesn't really work. And that's not even to begin by saying like, that's not even begin to touch on all of the problems with like consumer activism and that sort of stuff. But just like, people are just really bad at boycotting, and sometimes it's worthless. And obviously, like, I'm not saying you shouldn't boycott things. I don't think you should necessarily buy products that come from people who are directly shown to be harmful, right? Like transphobic, homophobic, racist, misogynist, etc.
Right.
But at the same time, like, I don't know, man. People once decided they would boycott Modern Warfare 2 on PC because there weren't going to be dedicated servers, and literally, like, half of the people in that boycott group just ended up buying the game and playing it anyway. So like really like really like this is, if we're going to have any kind of meaningful discussion about something or meaningful action, I don't know if it should be financially abstaining because people are, one, very bad at that, and two, it should really more be about financially supporting the people who are victims of that system.
Yes. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have piracy, which is why we don't technically, you know, advocate or support.
We do not.
You know,
the official stance of the podcast is we do not necessarily advocate for you to go pirate.
Correct. However, we do recognize that it is a necessary solution for certain media out there. That if in an ideal world, animators and all creators alike were treated with, you know, living rights.
Yeah.
Like the ability to support themselves properly, and they were able to just create at their freedom, then yeah, we wouldn't need piracy because their media would then be able to be properly distributed without being throttled by different companies and then distributed piecemeal.
Right. Now,
so
I will say this as what I assume to be kind of a closing note on the sort of whole piracy thing in general, which is that there is actually now that Crunchyroll is bankrolling its own anime, there is quite a compelling reason to actually give them your money, because they are actually working on getting shows that either would not normally be made into anime, like Korean webtoons, like for instance, like Tower of God, which aired recently, and God of High School, which is airing right now. I think yes, it's still airing right now. Right, like those are very popular Korean webtoons, but there's fairly little chance that they would actually be adapted into an anime, despite the fact that their sort of stylistic cues come very much from anime. So it's very cool of Crunchyroll to bankroll that stuff. And plus, Crunchyroll has a lot of shows coming out that are like projects that are legitimately exciting for one reason or another, right? Where they're like more independent studios, they're people from diverse backgrounds, like at the head of creation of these things, right? These are shows that are made with, you know, diversity and inclusion kind of at the forefront of their thought process when they make something, which is very important because, like, you know, there is obviously something to be said about the fact that, anime that comes out of Japan, people are always just like, it's like not diverse. Well, it's like, yeah, but like they're also Japanese people. And in an American context, that takes a very different space, right? There is an argument to be made about Japan's homogenization and how they depict people who don't appear to be Japanese. Like, for instance, the very, very historically pretty bad portrayal of black characters, the historically very racist portrayal of Brazilians as an immigrant class in Japan. Those are very much something to consider. But it's very cool that we now have essentially independent studios being funded to make projects that actually like kind of come from a lineage of anime, but are made by people who wanted to see themselves in anime and are bringing that kind of idea forward. And it's just very cool that they get a chance to do that, because like before, the hurdle was very, very large, right? You had to get approved for like a television slot. You had to make sure you abided by what the investors wanted. You had to basically be afraid of not being renewed. Whereas with Crunchyroll, it's a lot of like these kind of more independent projects. And that's very cool to see. So there's a very real argument for giving them your money. Obviously, I would not be upset with you if you decided not to on the basis of the fact that they don't really pay their translators, which is another issue entirely, the issue of translation and invisible labor, and translation as an invisible labor that people don't really think about. But like, translation's fucking
extremely
work,
necessary.
right? And it is a link between you and what you're watching.
Yes, exactly. It's not all entirely bleak. There are some things that some streaming services are doing correct, and I do think that we should definitely support them in those kinds of endeavors, but that doesn't mean that there's not still a long way to go.
Right. Now, all that being said, there is a way to support animators in the industry in Japan, which is donating to the Animators Dormitory Project. It's been around for quite a bit of time now, and it has traditionally been the thing that people kind of point to when they're like, so like, what do we do now, right? So, if you want to support them, like maybe, and this is kind of funny, but like maybe just take your like Funimation or Crunchyroll subscription and just like slide it that.
Power move.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, they support new animators in the industry who I believe get paid maybe less than $10,000, the equivalent.
Yeah, they're basically like
per year.
Glorified interns, but they have to do the full-time work of full employees, which is
and
to
they
say
have to
that
live in
interns.
Tokyo. Yeah. Yep.
Capitalism is the same everywhere you go.
Right, and so this dormitory project helps pay for certain things like utilities, gives them a roof over their head, just gives them more peace of mind so that they can actually work without having to worry if they're going to eat the next day.
Right. It is one of those things that is like, it will not fix the structural problems in the industry, but it will alleviate the suffering of those who, need it, which is, I think, always kind of a noble thing to do. So.
Yeah, and hopefully when they're able to establish themselves as animators, they're able to push that kindness forward and maybe help future animators who were in the same, position as them. And it's all we can do, really, right now.
I mean, yeah, until we, burn down the system, it's about all we can do.
Until the movement.
Listen, I'm not gonna lie, like, looking at what's happening outside right now, we're getting pretty close to needing that. Like, it is a very scary time to be alive. And like, God, I don't like to dwell on it too much, in terms of like on the podcast, cause like, I really don't want to spread doom to people, right? Cause I personally think that like, it is very important not to give into the doom and gloom, mentality.
Oh yeah, and we're here to provide a bit of entertainment ourselves, so.
Right.
We don't
And,
want to
like,
drag everything
you know,
down.
Obviously, I've taken to like doom scrolling Twitter before I go to bed too.
Doom scrolling.
Yeah, it used to be like when you like browse like the like politics forums or whatever, and you see all the
Sure.
bleak things people believe. But now it's just scrolling through Twitter is just doom scrolling. It's the same diff, you know.
You don't have to go out and look for it anymore. You just have it there for you.
Every
right there
day
in your timeline.
we march forward into a perpetual abyss, and we just hope that the light of those around us is bright enough to guide the way. So,
yeah.
on that bleak note, I suppose, support animators in the industry, support the industry where possible, but also recognize that the industry is really doing you nor the workers no favors whatsoever. They don't owe you anything, and they will give you as little as possible for as much as possible.
Yeah. Corporations don't need you to defend them. They don't have feelings.
They do not. Corporations, unfortunately, do not have feelings, because if they did, my God, might the world look different. Unfortunately, when we decided that corporations are people in the United States, it did not magically turn them into people with feelings and empathy. So, unlucky. We'll try again next time. Anyway, that's been us. What are you up to, Renu? Where can we find you on the internet?
Oh my God. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Tumblr and Twitch, all at SwanDrawn. You can find me on Instagram at swan.drawn. I have been streaming commission work lately, so if you want to hang out and chill and art and stuff, that's me. That's what I'll be doing.
Very nice.
Yeah. What about you?
You can find me all places at Literal Soup. I finally made some progress on that essay that I talked about like 2 or 3 months ago. Yeah, it's been eating a hole in my brain, like just actively eating a hole in my brain. I'm trying to get it done before like my next kind of work assignment rolls around, so that I don't have to worry about it anymore. I'm not gonna make any promises. I'm not gonna make any promises about when it's gonna come out. Soon, TM. That is all I can say.
Okay.
Yep.
We'll look forward to it.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. Something that has been I've been thinking about for like months now. For various reasons.
Well, good.
I'm really not gonna be up to much. Oh, I did forget to mention this during the catch up a bit, but HoloLive English dropped, which is you will know if you are a frequent member of our server. I will just post out of context screen caps of what's happening in the streams, and it's interesting. I have some thoughts about it, but that's neither here nor there, so that I don't have to edit that into the whole mix, etc, etc, etc. But yeah, that's what we're up to. That's where you can find us on the internet. The patrons we are thanking this month are Evan, Cheru, Frostfall, Magpie Nerd Test, Sean, Claire, and Dylan. Thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot. Thank you everyone for listening. Our opening is by Scott T Network, and our ending is by Taco Okada. And I suppose we will see you next time.
See you next time.
さようなら。また明日ね。